You are listening to From Embers, a weekly show on CFRC 101.9 FM about anarchist and anti-authoritarian ideas and practice. We are broadcasting from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples on land that has come to be called Kingston, Ontario, Canada, because of the thievery and brutality of the Canadian state and its empire-loving parents. From Embers is about fires, some real and some metaphorical. Fires started generations ago and tended to over the years. Little sparks all across this territory that we hope will grow, spread, and engulf the thieving state called Canada and the capitalist system that has plagued this land since the fur trade. Today's fire starter is right down the road from here in Prince Edward County, Ontario. I had the chance to sit down for tea with Christine, who along with some friends runs a bookshop, serves food in her community through Food Not Bombs, publishes an anarchist newsletter, and organizes campaigns for positive change in her area. All of this in a spread out rural region with a population of less than 25,000 and just one town of less than 5,000 people. We talked about various projects she gets up to in the county, her anarchist politics, and what it's like trying to organize in such a small place. So I'm here with Christine, and we're talking about anarchist organizing in Prince Edward County. How would you like to introduce yourself? How would you describe yourself?
I'm an older anarchist that works in the county, worked in public libraries, and violence against women work, and raised my kids here.
And what can you tell me about Prince Edward County? If someone had never been here, what would you say about the place that you live?
It's really beautiful geographically. It's like a little island south of Belleville, and I live in the very south end on the shore of in the southern end of the county, and we've lived here for almost 20 years. When we bought our house, it was inexpensive, and now it's really expensive to live here.
And how would you describe your politics, your personal politics?
So I'm an anarchist. 2 out of my 3 kids are. One of them's almost there. And though we all, really, for many years we were, I guess we would say, socialists, Marxists, but eventually, basically how I look at anarchism is basically like that, but without government. So that's often how I will describe it to people who have no idea what it would be. So anti-capitalist, anti-authoritarian, freedom-seeking, and mutual aid, and all of those things.
So what's wrong with capitalism?
Everything is wrong with capitalism. Well, I think we only have to look around the world to see everything that's wrong with capitalism. So many people are without and cannot be everything that they could be as human beings because we withhold things from them through capitalism. It exploits people. It steals their surplus labor. It's just such a ridiculous and heartless system. I can't even really believe that we still believe in it. I think a lot of people don't believe in it, but they're just at a loss because they can't seem to envision a world differently. Yet every day they do things differently that don't involve capitalism, and they'd only need to extend that further to make it, a reality.
And why can't the state or the government be part of that?
Well, I think it's fairly obvious that the state and capitalists are basically hand in glove. One supports the other. All the people who are in charge of the world, hold the power, just like capitalism holds the power over other people. You basically have to be a capitalist to even be in politics. You need to have access to money, and that's why poor people aren't running for office, other than the fact that they're trying to eke out a living and hold down 3 jobs. But I mean, and also from an anarchistic point of view, you can't have freedom if people are governing you. That's not to say that, because a lot of people misunderstand that, I think. That's not to say that there wouldn't be rules. I always say, I think that's a very well-known sort of saying, not no rules, but no rulers. I mean, we would just have to organize society differently than the way it currently is organized, so that everybody could, take part in controlling their own lives.
Okay. And what are some of the projects that you've done here in the county?
So we've done actually a lot of things that probably wouldn't have been considered anarchist projects even when our kids were young. We homeschooled 2 of our 3 kids. That actually came because I also taught for a bit, and I didn't like how things worked in schools. I don't think they're the best place for kids, public schools, private schools, whatever, where there's not a freedom to learn what they want and to be supported in that. So we did do what's called unschooling, yet our children are all incredibly, well-spoken and can read and write and fairly, really turned out to be amazing people. But during that time, while we were homeschooling, we also held like art camps here. Our kids always had friends over. They were involved in theater and a lot of community-based things that didn't really cost money, because we also didn't have a lot of money. So I guess those are like not necessarily anarchist projects, but they're anarchistic in that there's freedom there. And we really believed in that. And then since then, we also did other things, like we do food not bombs. I find that's a really good sort of entry point for people, because everybody loves food, and the Food Not Bombs philosophy isn't a charity model. People who come to Food Not Bombs also cook with us and eat with us. We all eat together. It's really about just coming together in community. The other project that is actually online, but that I'm really happy with, because it started like a couple of years ago now, and it's a mutual aid page. And I specifically called it mutual aid because I wanted to tie it to Kropotkin and the whole idea of mutual aid, so people would look that up and understand, what it means. And it's just opened up this amazing, there's 700 people in our community on this page, and it's basically give, take, borrow, or lend, and people are constantly giving things away, but also saying, I'd really like to get some honey and I don't know how to extract it. Does anybody know how to do that? That would come over and do this, and people, it's just amazing. At the beginning, it was really weird because people have such a money mind, we're so tied to that people would be putting things on. They'd say, oh, and I'm willing to pay, and we'd have to remind them that there was no money there. And it didn't even have to be reciprocal. You don't have to give something back. I mean, it's just about building community, with each other. So anyways, I'm really happy about that. And then last summer I opened a little bookstore info shop called Diggers, that has a lot of radical left books, anarchist books, feminists, also used books, and people are welcome to come, and they don't have to buy books. They can just come and have tea, read zines. We have lots of zines.
Can you explain a little bit the concept of mutual aid?
Well, I guess it's basically the idea that people are naturally, the whole Darwin idea of survival of the fittest can and has been disproved in many ways, because people do want to help each other, and I don't think that people will say, oh, you have such a Pollyanna. I don't think that people are necessarily good or bad. I think people can be good or bad depending on circumstances and all kinds of variables. But certainly I think it's a natural thing to want to help and advance even your own life is advanced by other people. So it's not even a matter of like martyring yourself or putting yourself out. It's the fact that helping yourself, helping others helps you as well. So that's sort of the idea. And I think we see that especially when disasters happen. You see tons of people who, come together, and they're not concerned about how much money they're going to make or who got what or who's getting more than the other person. So that's what mutual aid is for me.
And how does a typical Food Not Bombs day look like here in Prince Edward County?
It's very different, I think, than a lot of others, because we don't have the population. And at first I was just basically calling it Food Not Bombs and showing up with food. But basically we connect with each other. There's like maybe 3 or 4 of us, so it's a very small crew, and we salvage some food, or we cook at each other's houses, or we cook at our own houses, and we all come together in the summer at the park in town, and in all the other months we fundraise to rent the town hall, Picton Town Hall, and we eat out of there. And we do other things too, like really, really free markets and game nights and that kind of thing. And we always have a literature table. That's like a really key thing at Food Not Bombs, is to have literature there about anarchism and feminism, and also just like things that would be helpful to the community, like where they can get free legal aid, or where they might get dentistry for their kids, and those kind of things.
And what kind of community would you say is coming out to eat the food?
There's a bit of both. And actually I think that that's what's great. Like there'll be people who come that are like seniors who really, they might have access to food, but they also like the company. We get a lot of families with little kids that run around. And also, a lot of my friends just come. And so, yeah.
Sure. Okay, and you said you distribute books and zines at Food Not Bombs. You also have a book and zine shop out there in the summer. What draws you so much to literature? What do you think that lends?
We've always been huge, like our whole family. We're always into reading. And my dad, and my mom, who were basically working class. My dad worked at GM. My mom was a cashier. Even though they weren't super educated, they were always really into books. I always loved books. I worked at the library for 10 years, and I write. And it's interesting, because I almost feel like, because anarchists really like to read, and there's just so much interesting history and so many, points of view to argue and just talk about and discuss. I just love books, and I love the idea of zines, because not everybody can afford to do books, and lots of people have good ideas who might not otherwise have a chance to print something. So that's why.
You've done a bit of writing here also. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So 4 other people and myself have started a thing called The Torch, and I was actually putting out things on my own for a while, and then I'm really interested in collaborating, because I think that I'm really trying to do projects that don't replicate how things normally work, like in hierarchical systems. and frankly, it's challenging because, you know, we are raised all our lives to have certain people at the top and some, you know, and other people following. And so anyways, we started this thing called The Torch, and we don't publish as regularly as we'd like, and it's just trying to get everybody together to have time, you know, because we all work, to write pieces. And then we look at each other's pieces, we share them and talk about what we think is strong and weak, and, you know, just try to improve our writing, and also respect each other's points of view, though, I mean, it is an anarchist publication, so those are the kind of things, you know, we talk about. Yeah.
And what are some of the topics that have been covered in The Torch?
Well, I tend to write mostly things that are a lot of anti-capitalist things, and I try to be like, obviously anti-capitalism, but alternatives and solutions. So I'm very interested in getting people to do things that are different. So alternatives to capitalism. And one of our writers is a farm worker, and she also owns land that she farms, and so she has a real interest in the environment, so she writes a lot about that kind of thing. One of our writers, comrades, is a single mom, and has had poverty issues, so she can speak very, you know, well about firsthand things. And and one is the son of one of the women, so I mean, we all write about things that we're specifically more interested in, and one of the people likes to write book reviews because she likes to read books, and that's the kind of thing she's into. But yeah, and recently one of the writers, Roz, wrote a really excellent piece on the Picton Town Hall, because there's a lot of gentrification in the county. I know that's kind of like a supposedly urban term, but, you know, it applies to almost any tourist town, I would think, like if you think of Niagara-on-the-Lake or whatever. So the situation here is just terrible as far as that goes. There's like a housing crisis, there's, you know, seasonal work because we're a tourist place, so, and servers and young people have, you know, no place to live, and they're having to like live in Belleville and then there's no transportation. It's a mess, you know. And I can only see it getting worse, honestly, unless something happens. But anyways, one of the developers in town has bought this big hotel, and he has shown interest in buying the Picton Town Hall, and the county, like municipality, was thinking of actually putting it up for sale, but a lot of us kind of galvanized our energies and got them to at least hold off till they're going to ask for an RFP, which is a request for proposal. And so she wrote a really good piece on that.
So you talked about the 3 to 4 people who help you with Food Not Bombs, mm-hmm. and the 3 to 4 people who also wrote for The Torch. Mm-hmm. Are they the same 3 to 4 people?
Well, actually, no. Okay. Interestingly, so no, because the 4 people who write, 2 of them have never been really involved in Food Not Bombs, and the other people who are involved in Food Not Bombs, so 2 of them do go to both groups, sure. Basically, and the other people are, a lot of people who come to Food Not Bombs are not anarchists at all, but they are, you know, progressive and community-minded people. Generally, there are a lot of artists here, and they're usually not the well-off artists, but the artists that are, you know, just doing smaller things. The one of them who's a good friend does, like, I think her point in life is just to make festivals and make people have fun, and she always comes and we have like a crew page online, so it varies, like, and I just put out a call, or somebody else puts out a call and just says, you know, the meal's tomorrow, who's coming for setup, who's coming to clean, who's coming to strike, and who's going to bring what, that kind of thing.
Great. So it sounds like whether or not they're actually like anarchists, self-described, you've got maybe 6 people even.
Yeah.
So how did you meet those people? How did you find those people to do projects with?
I've known, because I worked at, first of all, because I homeschooled my kids, a lot of people in the county got to know us because, it seemed like everything we did was sort of so-called fringe. We homeschooled, we're vegan. We gave up well-paying jobs to come and live in the country, that kind of thing. And then my kids were involved in the community theater when they were young. My son was the only punk that ever went to that high school. Him and his girlfriend, I must say. Actually, funny story there. He wouldn't stand for the national anthem, which was like a huge deal at that high school. But anyways, and then I worked at the public library as an outreach worker. So obviously, I would know lots of people. And my job there wasn't just outreach, but I did special events. So I organized marches, even if they didn't have to do with the library. But I could, get the word out through that. I did a lot of things for women's issues. We did, Take Back the Night events and those kind of things. Yeah.
The silent, the severed, the path of raven. The silent, the severed, the path of raven. The silent, the severed, the path of come back in from the cold. Someday I will come back in from the cold. Someday I will come back in from the cold. And shatter all this industry. cold. Someday I will come back in from the cold. Yeah, shadow, shining in the street. Someday I will come back in from the cold. Someday I will come back in from the cold. A gas can, a gas can, a gas can to get the timer. A gas can, a gas can, a gas can to get the timer.
Sleeping masters roused, burning hose from beds, steaming toddlers blood from the watery jets. Ribbons, slices of soap, the ephemeral rewards, painted slaves whose selfless acts accord a higher value to their masters. These parting gears and both pistols console await the remainder. And too bad the tribute's paid to lives that relegate these thrones, to lives spent valuing the runners up are known, and to the fleeting undesirable. Nothing surprises me these days. I just sit and watch the boxcars roll by and wait. Patient, unattended. So patient, so unattended. A package under a terminal pension, a short fuse to scatter, steady hands forget to remember the better lives have been lived in. Parting beer, the margins end, console locked in prisons and lost on the gallows that have ever been enshrined in palaces. Not your fault. There's nothing you can do. It's just the way it is. There's nothing we can do.
You're listening to From Embers, a regular podcast about anarchist and anti-authoritarian ideas and practice throughout so-called Canada. Check us out at fromembers.libsyn.com.
And that was Blackbird Rom with Silent Spring, a special request from today's interviewee, followed by Propagandhi with Purina Hall of Fame. If you're just tuning in, today we're bringing you an interview with Christine, an anarchist organizer in nearby Prince Edward County. I personally love this story because sometimes anarchists in Kingston complain about how small Kingston is, how few people are interested in our politics, how difficult it can be to get people to come out to events and actions, and how much easier it must be to live in a bigger city like Montreal or the Bay Area. But here's Christine, doing it all in a place that's literally like 1/20th the size of Kingston, and she's got so many ideas. It's pretty inspiring. You gave a workshop recently at an anarchist book fair about, did you call it organizing in smaller towns or smaller places?
I called it small town organizing. I think I just stole that off a zine title of somebody else who did it, I think, in Grand Rapids. But I called it small town organizing. I mean, it was small town and also smaller centers, I guess. But we have a really small town. I mean, it's actually amazing. Like, last year, some people came to the shop, and also, as you mentioned, I have a shop, but it's at my house in the garage, basically, fixed up, but still. And people come in there, and they're just amazed. Like, I had these two people who were out biking, and they came from Montreal, and they had no idea, and they were just biking down in South Bay. And they came in, and I went out there. I usually let people, browse for a while before I bother going out, because I don't want to be hovering or whatever. And I went in there and I said, "Hi, how are you?" or whatever. And the guy says, "Oh, wow. When I go back to Montreal, they will not believe that I just rode my bike up to this place. I go into this little bookstore and it's this really radical bookstore in the middle of nowhere."
So what would you say are some of the biggest differences between being an anarchist in somewhere like Prince Edward County and being an anarchist in a bigger city?
Sometimes you really feel... Well, obviously, in a big city, you're going to find a lot of other people. So it's, you have a bigger circle. And I think, too, that you can, in some ways, isolate yourself from so-called regular people because you can just be with your own kind all the time. Whereas here, you really, and I find that hard, you really have to make an effort to maybe not be as judgy or be more willing to, not choose sides sometimes because you also have to live with these people. And, I don't really want to, even though I'm sure this actually does happen, have people cross the street when they see me because they either think I'm too radical or they just don't want to discuss politics or whatever. Not that I do that all the time, but, so it makes it difficult. And sometimes you do have to choose sides because you really feel it's important, and then you will have made that division. So in that way it's more difficult. On the other hand, a small community is also very supportive, and sometimes I am absolutely amazed at someone who I mistook for someone who would be super conservative and not understand my point of view at all is actually really open to that. So it maybe makes you get to really know people more and kind of expand the base. A lot of people will not self-identify as that because they tie it to all this history of whatever. But when you ask them, I've actually said to people, "So do you believe in capitalism? Do you think it's a good thing?" And they're like, "No." And I go, "What do you think about government kind of controlling everything we do?" "Oh, no, that's not good." So I'm like, well, you're pretty much an anarchist. It's those are the two kind of main things. I might add something would you like to be free enough to really pursue things that, you feel you've missed out on because you didn't have opportunity or didn't have money? And they're like, "Oh, yeah." And these are all anarchist themes,
What are some of the things that you found most challenging about organizing in such a small place?
Well, some things for example, if you do some things that are really unpopular, you could possibly have trouble at your employment, I had that happen with regards to a Sir John A. Macdonald statue that was put up. I haven't for a bit, but I used to write a lot of letters to the editor on specific things. And interestingly, a lot of people would say, wow, I totally thought that, but I would be afraid to actually say that. So yeah, I guess that's the hardest thing, is that, you do lose friends sometimes, like people you thought were really your friend, but your politics for some reason scares them, which is, silly, because they know me, they know what I do, they know where I live, they've known my kids, but they just, I don't know, don't want to be associated or whatever. So I think that's probably the hardest.
And what is like the most awesome thing about organizing in a smaller place?
The fact that you can, for the same reason, because people do know you, you can change people's minds who you thought you would never, influence in any way, because you're forced together by social things that go on. You might just go to an event you're at the same event, and and you just strike up a conversation at the local pub or whatever, whereas if you were in the city, you might never run into that person at a pub. You might just go to pubs where all the other people are anarchists. So sometimes you meet somebody at the Legion or something. You start talking about the war and Nazis or whatever, and next thing you know, you're telling them to read Mark Bray's book or whatever about Antifa or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And those, it's like really interesting. People will come together for that in a small town.
Of all your projects, it sounds like there are many. Which do you think has been the most successful in that regard? Like, what's really helped you sort of break in that way?
I think the store, amazingly, even though it's only been like this summer or this past summer, I think it's mostly because I guess I'm comfortable because it's in my space, and it's very social, and people like books when they come in and chat, and just have like a lot of time, to relax and not feel pressured. And I'm in the country, it's really beautiful down here, and I think that maybe the store, I'm really looking forward to doing like lots of special events this summer. We had discussion nights and I didn't think anybody would come, and like 6 and 7 people come, and then we had like Cindy come, Milstein, from like, I've read all kinds of books that she's written, and I really admire her work. And she came to this tiny little place, and she's a very well-known writer. And we had like 15 people in November, and there's no heat in the store. So we had the heaters on in there all day, and we served chili and had a free meal, and it was awesome. So I guess I'd say for now the store.
Do people stop by? Do you get traffic coming in, reading zines?
Yeah, I do. Books? Mostly in the summer, obviously, because because it's a tourist town, like tourist area. But we also get like lots of cyclists and people who love nature out here, and birders, because we're close to the bird observatory. At one time, I guess it was maybe Thanksgiving, so this would be like October, and my family was all here, and we were eating, and somebody drove up, and we weren't open, but I don't know if I left the sign out or what at the road. And this man and his wife went in, and they were, I don't know, older people. They looked like retired or whatever. And they were in there for quite a while. I was just going to let them take whatever, because you can go in there and just like, there's a note that says put money on the table if you want to buy something. And I went back out there, and the guy had been like head of some union, and he was just talked to me for a long time. So yeah, people just drop by, or I usually have a sign at the road, like a sandwich board, and and yarn bombed the post for my mailbox in red and black, so some people kind of get it if they drive by.
And what are some of the discussions and events that you've had at the store?
We had Cindy Milstein come with, that was like a bigger event with her latest book, and Rebellious Grief. And but the other ones that I had, which were really simple, I had zines. Like I had one that was about capitalism, and you can read a zine in like, I don't know, 20 minutes or something. I also sent the PDF out, and I just made like an event on Facebook, and I said, come have tea and let's talk about this. So those were the kind of things that we had. And yeah, so they were mostly those things, like reading texts and then discussing them. Yeah.
Great. Do you relate at all to anarchists outside of Prince Edward County?
Yes, thankfully. So obviously, so my kids are, and they live in Toronto, so
Okay.
they have a circle. I've, met, like, I have ones that I've gotten to know over the years, like in Detroit, because I took like IWW 101. So, people come up from the States and then you get connected online or whatever. The ones in Peterborough helped me start Food Not Bombs. And then, of course, in Kingston, meeting you guys. And I met a lot of people through the Montreal Anarchist Book Fair, which I've been going to for quite a long, I don't know, maybe 7 years or something like that. And when I first discovered that, I was just in heaven, because I was like, felt like very alone, and my kids had moved away. And so, yeah, so that's great. And that's how I got to actually know a lot of people, like from Kingston, because I met them there, and then we had that connection. And I've met some from Kitchener, and I just stay in touch online. And thankfully the Kingston people can come, and we're all there. You guys were there for the opening. Well, you didn't make it, but other people who could, for the opening of Diggers, which was like really meant a lot to me, to have other anarchists come that day. Like it just, yeah, it really meant a lot to me that they took the time to come out and support my tiny little project. It's a very small store.
Do you have any sort of ideas for future projects that you would love to get started in this area? Things that you on the horizon, real or imagined?
Real or imagined. So I always say, if I was younger and I had more time and energy, I would definitely organize workers in the service sector, service and retail. But I also don't believe in organizing outside of my workplace. Like, so I would have to be a server or work retail in order to organize. I mean, I would support other people, but that's not, it has to be the workers themselves who organize. But I would, like do 101s here and really put a push on that, because I think that could really make a difference in their lives and move us away from capitalism to some degree. I mean, you'd still have capitalism, but if you're ever going to hold the means of production, you're going to have to start somewhere. And that's like, there's people, I don't even know how to, I just want people to know, or I wish I could encourage people to understand that they can withhold their labor, and that's where all their power is. And of course, that would mean you'd have to build some mutual aid at the same time, so that when people don't have work, they still have food and housing and so forth. So it's like, that would be a big project. More reformist, I guess you'd say. I would really like to encourage people who do come to the county, when they start businesses, to actually start worker-owned and operated co-ops. That's always difficult, because then it just usually is one person who's starting it, and I don't know. But anyways, that's something. And it would also be a way that people who might not have much capital could, pool their resources. So those are like imagined ones. So real ones, I will do those, is I will just extend the things we're doing at Diggers to have more discussion nights, possibly, and I'm not sure about that, but like camping weekends for anarchists to come, and just not just anarchists, but people who want to talk about anti-capitalism or whatever. I'm really interested in Skillshare, which is some of the recent wage work that I just started with a learning center here for adults. So I'm interested in that. And, we do grow food and we have lots of land. I have a friend who's like an herbalist. I'd like her to come and talk about that. And someone I know who's an anarchist in Guelph, is doing these things called Moon School, which is really interesting. And because we're in the country, I'd like to, do that kind of thing. Teach people to cook and, yeah.
Where do you see it all headed? Like, best case scenario, all those projects happen. How would this community be different in 5 or 10 years from how it is now?
Wow. Well, I would really like to see the working class start to control the town more. If there were more, if there were more things like co-op housing and co-op food production and all that, you wouldn't have this huge disparity between people who have and have not. I would like to see the end of limousines driving around to wineries. How to make that happen, it would be great if I thought that you could just get rid of all of them by like torching them or whatever. Not that that's, I just feel like there has to be other ways that we can get those kind of things for people to just see that this is not the direction we need to go in. If we're going to make real change, then we're going to have to start looking at how we treat each other, how we raise food, how we house people, how we take care of mentally ill, violence against women, all of these things, and like really pull together and share all of our skills and resources. So that's how I like to see it. I sometimes say I'm going to make like a rack card. I don't know if you know, it's like an advertising, and there's like millions of them in the county for all the businesses and the Airbnbs and the fancy, places, restaurants and everything. And they make these really shiny cards that just, promotes their business or whatever. But I'd like to have one that's like a fake one about the county and how come to the county where no one is ever hungry and no one is ever unhoused and everyone's health care is taken care of and children are all loved and women are not abused, and just make this utopia type place. But it's not really utopian. Like it's really within our grasp, if we try.
Could people still come here and look at nice things?
Yes. Actually, because I travel. I love to travel. I love to go to new places. And, sometimes people here will have this, they kind of have this hate on for tourists. And then the other half is that we hate them, but, well, they don't hate them, but, they don't like having them, but at the same time they need them for their economy. But it doesn't mean you have to, provide in my opinion, ridiculous experiences. The area is so phenomenally beautiful, like beaches, and like we have tons of nice areas. You could have a worker-owned restaurant, and you could grow food, and you could have, I mean, I have nothing against wine. I drink wine. You could have a winery that was owned by a bunch of people who are into wine, and want to work the grapes and not have to hire migrant workers, and, which is another whole thing here. That people will say, well, we have to get migrant workers because no one else will work. But they're offering jobs that are like, you have to work 7 days a week in any kind of weather for absolute minimum wage. So yeah, sign me up. I mean, who wants to do that? So instead they exploit people who come from places where they really, are desperate. And so sorry, I'm like gone on that whole idea, but yeah, I think we could definitely still have tourists, and we would welcome, and I do, people come here that come to the shop or whatever, and they're from all over, and I'm interested in where they're from and what they're up to, and a lot of people really don't care about fancy stuff. They they want a nice place and nice people and good food. And yeah, I think people would come here just for that. That's what would be so different about it.
And is there a song or two that you think would best suit this interview segment? If you could choose the music for community radio.
Oh, if I could choose the music.
Or perhaps an anarchist song that you find inspirational.
Yeah, I don't know. I do like Blackbird, but I also really like The Coup. So, I don't know. Boots Riley is so good. Everything, I like his work. The Guillotine song is pretty good.
Could've stayed home, just cried and cussed. May or your guns go off if it's time to bust. May or they tanks have time to rust. They got the armies turning bullets into gold. They got the hookers turning tricks into cold. And every time the police kicks in the dough, an angel gas breaks dips in the O. And even if a D-boy flips in my O, it ain't enough to buy shit anymore. Sleep in the doorway, piss on the floor. Look in the sky, wait for missiles to show. It's finna blow, cause they got the TV, we got the truth. They own the judges and we got the proof. We got hella people, they got helicopters. They got the bombs and we got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. Talk about it, not show. Be about it, spot know. Talk about it, not show. Be about it, spot know. I just spit the dope lines, I don't snort them. Tell the boss to call police to escort them. You don't write out them lies, you just quote them. Get offline, plug into this modem. No, you can't outvote them, the rules are still golden. Only jewels we holdin' if we guardin' our scrotum. If you press the ear to the turf that is stolen, you can hear the sound of limitations exploding. Please sir, may we have another portion? We're children of the beast that dodged the abortion. Neck placed firm between the floor and the portion. We should just down, don't call it extortion. Caution, we're coming for your head. So call the feds and get files to shred. Every textbook read said bring you the bread, but guess what, we got you instead. We got